Hello and welcome to the BamCam podcast with your hosts, Jack Burnette and Alison Castellano. I'm Wendy McConnell. Hello, guys. How are you?
Good morning.
We're good. How are you?
Oh, you know, it's not started out to be a great day, but it's going to get better, right?
Right. It's early in the morning, and it could only go up from here.
Correct.
No more 9 o'clock recordings, guys. So today we are going to be talking about, well, there's a little something happening in this country right now. Some refer to it as an election.
Yeah.
There's an election?
There's an election.
Yeah, I think you'd have to be living under a rock to not know that there's an election happening. And, you know, it's funny, the media hypes it up. And every year, you kind of said this, you've been through a lot more election cycles than I have, Dad. But, you know, every year they say it's the most important. It's the most decisive. It's the most.
It's
And
always the superlative. And, you know, I've been voting now for closing in on 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's every time when we have national elections, it's the most consequential election of our lifetime.
Oh, yeah.
So
And,
every one of
you know,
them has been.
Yeah. And I've seen that. And, you know, I've only been voting for a few election cycles, but every time, you're right. It is the most consequential, the most important. And I'm glad that they want us to be out there and vote and use our voices. But it's just, you have to understand the media hype.
True. It is. And
So it's not a big deal at all.
No. So anyway, it's out there. We get questions frequently from clients that, or even just casual friends or whatever that want to know what the markets think.
Yeah, it's because there is so much hype out there. It feels like as we get closer and closer to election day, there's uncertainty, and it creates some anxiety for just for regular people like you and me, and our clients who invest with us, and that's understandable. But you know what you have to understand is if you're an investor and you're invested for the long run, I'm talking 30, 40, 50 or more years, your portfolio is going to see an election every 4 years.
Correct.
So you might see, 14 or more elections during your investment time horizon.
Correct.
And
they're always the most important election.
They are. They are.
So it's interesting because elections are emotional.
Yeah.
Markets are not.
Yeah.
And that's that's really the separating factor is that we get hung up personally and individually and family and I do think that our country is divided somewhat politically and primarily driven by our media.
Oh yeah.
And the media is not your friend.
Yeah.
The media is out there trying to tell you what to think, how to vote, what to do.
And they're also, they sensationalize a lot of things. And I saw that even when Adrian was working in TV as a meteorologist. And, weather doesn't seem like something that is often talked about as being sensationalized. But in our market, we'd have a little summer rainstorm, and Adrian's station would call him up and say, "You got to get in here right now. We got to go wall to wall."
It's even an impact weather day, and it's rain.
Yeah. So even the weather gets sensationalized a little bit in the media, and so it's important to kind of take a step back and realize that all the headlines and the charts and the graphs that you see relating to the election that all the news stations are showing right now, it's kind of designed to be. I don't know the right word, but like almost like clickbaitish.
Right.
Like, it's just designed to get you hyped up and get your emotions running. And
the national media, these are all corporate entities, and they all have agendas, and they instruct their personalities that are on air to promote those agendas. And there is an emerging independent media that's out there on the internet that's available, that's a little bit more objective, but some of those contributors also have agendas as well. but the national media, the network televisions, every one of the cable news networks all have agenda.
Yeah.
Some on the left, some on the right. Nobody is out there just calling it accurately like they see.
Yeah.
Same thing with the national papers, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, the LA Times, and even local newspapers all have agenda. It used to be, I can remember 40, 50 years ago, particularly in local newspapers, when they would make recommendations or endorsements, they carried some weight as kind of, you're thinking, well, these people are thinking somewhat independently and whatever.
Yeah.
Not so anymore.
Yeah.
Nobody is independent. Nobody is doing anything other than promoting
their agenda,
the corporate agenda that is coming down. It may not even be what that particular person thinks, but they're doing their job to promote a position that's coming from their company. And what they want to do. So I would encourage you to perhaps find some sources of independent news. There's a number of podcasts. Of course, we're advocating podcasts. We hope you're listening to ours first.
Yeah.
But there's also podcasts that are out there, and it is it's kind of fascinating to me to see the evolution of the media over that. But they're hyping this election. They're making it very emotional for you. And as a result, it creates a lot of stress and uncertainty out there. And one thing markets do not like is uncertainty.
No.
Markets like certainty better. So the election kind of falls into this category of geopolitical events. Markets react to geopolitical events swiftly, but not meaningfully.
Yeah.
So
you often have short-term volatility, but nothing that's super lasting long-term.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about what's at stake in this election. So we obviously have the presidency that's at stake. It's really kind of strange in this circumstance when we had the Democratic candidate, Joe Biden, was the one that went all through the primaries and that sort of thing. He had a bad debate by some people's standards, and then was pressed to say, I'm no longer going to be the candidate. And then the Democratic Party appointed Kamala Harris, the vice president, to step in his place, and now she's the candidate. So versus Donald Trump.
And so what's interesting is you said that the markets don't really like uncertainty.
Correct.
Right? But we have Donald Trump, who's been president before.
Correct.
And we have Kamala Harris, who has been serving as our vice president. So it's maybe a little bit less uncertainty this go round.
I think people have a general idea of what each one stands for on a policy perspective. You also have essentially 1/3 of the Senate that's up for election. Senators, you may recall, have 6-year terms, and there's 100 senators. So it's either 33 or 34 senators are up for re-election or election.
Or
on
election,
those seats.
yeah.
And not all of them are re-election. Some of them are open seats. It is skewed in favor of the Republicans a little bit because there's more Democratic seats that are having to defend the
incumbencies
at this point in time. So right now, the Democrats have a 51-49 edge in the Senate, and so it's razor thin. And the control of the Senate is up for grabs in this election, and it's kind of pressure on the Democrats to hold that. But it's probably, most of the experts are thinking that they probably will lose 1 or 2 seats. So it's still going to be close.
Yeah.
Whether or not the Democrats hold on to the majority or if it's going to be a split, in which case then the vice president
is the
breaks tying votes, or if it's going to be a slight majority to the Republicans. Then in the House, all 435 members of the House are up for reelection. They're all on 2-year terms. Right now, the Republicans have a very slight, I think it's 4 or 5 seat majority.
Okay.
So it's essentially evenly split, but the controlling party generally has the Speaker of the House, which controls the agenda. So the House, everybody's up for reelection. So who knows what it's going to be. So right now you have a Democratic president, a Democratic Senate, and a Republican House. So it's somewhat of a split government. And historically, that's what markets like.
Yeah.
Markets have historically performed better when you don't have a controlling party controlling the White House and both houses of Congress. So when you have at least an opposition party controlling at least one of those pieces, markets have outperformed than when it's not been that way, regardless of whether it's Republican or Democrat.
Yeah.
So,
and so kind of an interesting take on that is that perhaps some of the more extreme one party favored legislation doesn't have a chance to get passed.
correct.
And so it's a little bit more certain that things will stay the same.
Well, you think about this. It was only 2 years ago that the Republicans took over majority of the House.
Mm-hmm.
So it was all Democratic.
All Democrat. Mm-hmm.
So all of the policies that the current administration touts as accomplishments, whether or not you agree with them or not, doesn't really matter. The ones they account as accomplishments were all run through when they had control of both sides.
Mm-hmm.
So things that, some of the policies, which some would say have led to the inflation, ironically, the Inflation Protection Act, it really was a environmental Green New Deal type of legislation.
Mm-hmm.
And it really didn't address inflation, but it created dollars that went into the economy that probably fueled inflation. So even though it was named the Inflation Protection Act. So nevertheless, those were put through when they could control both houses of Congress. So, and then you also, in some jurisdictions, will have some state and local elections that are coming up there. All of these are important, and you should make informed decisions and study and look at it. Because at the end of the day, whether or not a person is Republican or Democrat or independent or whatever, what's really important is what are the policies they're advocating, and how do those policies align with your thinking and what you think would be best for our country, what you think would be best for you, and how your life works. Yeah. And so as a result, you need to understand what the policy is. Yeah. And so you have a lot of issues out there. You certainly have the issue about immigration. It's a hot issue there. The Democrats have kind of a looser approach to immigration than the Republicans have a tighter view on that. You also have things like the Ukraine war that's going on. You also have conflict in Israel and what our policies are going to be towards those conflicts around the world. You have tax policy. There's difference of opinions on both of those and what's at stake. There's a number. Abortion is a big issue, and the fact that in the previous presidential administration, the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade. That's a very emotional issue for a lot of people, and essentially they didn't make it a federal ban on abortion.
They just put the decision to the states.
The decision becomes a state by state issue and lets each state determine what the rules are on abortion in that given state and what they want to do. So all of these are policies that are, different people will rank the different policies different ways. And I think it's important that you educate yourself and not let media tell you
how to do
think
things.
and
Yes.
how to do.
Yeah.
It's important on all of us to not be zombies, but to think critically, to evaluate and understand how those policies.
Yeah, and we want our listeners and our clients and our friends to be engaged in the democratic process. We believe that that's important for each person and for our country.
To have a voice.
It's an important thing that we get to do. But I thought it was interesting. I was reading a study the other day, and a third of Americans believe that their financial future will be negatively impacted if the party that they least align with ends up winning the election.
False.
Yeah.
False.
It's just that emotional piece that's tied to it. But that's a big chunk of Americans.
Right. Well, and that's what makes it emotional. And I will tell you, the media would like you to believe that too.
Yeah.
It's everything. At the end of the day, markets and your investment accounts are apolitical.
Yeah.
They're not emotional. They're apolitical. They don't like it.
I've heard you say time and time again that the people who are running these companies in the private sector, they are smart. They're innovative, right. and they're going to find a way to make profits despite the political environment.
And earnings is what drives markets.
Yeah.
At the bottom, at the end of the day, but markets. As far as a multiple of earnings, that multiple expands and contracts, which makes the markets, relatively cheap or expensive, depending on what that multiple of earnings are. But the folks running these companies are very smart. If they understand what the policies are and what the rules of the game are, they can find a way to run their companies in a way that generate profits. And that's what we're investing in to buy. They don't really care which parties in the White House are in control.
Yeah.
What they care about are the policies and what the rules of the game are, so they can operate and find a way to.
Yeah, and they'll find a way to adapt no matter what the policies are, because that's what it takes to be successful in the world.
One big thing that impacts these companies that will impact them is that there's a stark difference in what the two presidential candidates believe corporate taxes should be. And that kind of comes back to, corporations really aren't a person. They're not something that's a bunch of wealth and that sort of thing. It's just a company. It's a shell. Personally, I believe corporate taxation shouldn't even exist, because it's a form of double taxation. So it's, I'm not in favor of taxes being layered at all kinds of levels within the economy. But we do have corporate income tax. Both parties advocate that. And so that corporate tax policy will drive the ability for companies to generate profits and how they manage that. So that's something that's up for grabs in this election. But at the bottom line is, markets don't care if there's a Democrat or Republican in the White House. They really just care about the policy and what's the ability to make a profit.
Yeah.
On there.
And if you look at it, at the end of the day, the market typically goes from bottom left to upper right.
Well, the economy expands.
Yeah.
Our population expands, our economy expands. Ultimately, the market capitalization of the entire market should expand correspondingly. And so as a result, markets over time generally go up.
Yeah.
They have for my entire investment lifespan, and doesn't mean they go up in a straight line.
No, they go up and down, but
the trend is generally up, and you really can't time it very well.
Yeah.
And so to set back and try to time markets, it's just a few weeks ago. This was back about 3 weeks ago. We had a week that the market went down about 5%.
Yeah.
And the headlines on, when you look at CNBC and Fox Business or Bloomberg, any of the financial networks that were talking about, well, is this a big thing? Is this a big correction? Is this going to be a correction, or is it going to be a bear market? All this kind of thing. Well, that 5% drop was recovered in about 5 or 6 days.
Yep.
And we hit new highs yesterday. And so you just can't time it. And there's been nothing material in any of this. So trying to time it is a fool's game.
Yeah.
In my opinion. And we have to, down days or down weeks or down months are not fun.
They happen. But that's why we're here. We're here to hold your hand and help you get through it and talk you off the ledge if we need to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So so try to separate your emotions, and we're in an emotional time with an election that's being blasted at us 24/7. Separate those emotions from your investments.
Yes.
Because the investments, are going to be there, and they're really not related to the emotions that you feel. It's going to be hard to not be emotional through the election cycle and all the way through November and even beyond. So I think that the key is just say the elections have a little bit to do because of the policies that can impact the companies that we're investing in. But at the end of the day,
they really don't.
Will figure it out.
Yeah.
And they will make profits, and the markets will grow over the long term.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. I know who I'm voting for.
We don't have the answers. We don't have a crystal ball. We don't know who's going to win. But yeah, we want everyone to vote and exercise their voice.
So there you go.
And if you're emotional about your investments, give us a call.
Yeah.
You can find us. I'm Alison, ALISON at eaterfw.com.
And I'm Jack at eaterfw.com.
So get out and vote and calm down.
Yeah.
Calm down. That's probably a good piece of advice, Wendy.
Yes.
Wendy.
All right. Thank you, guys. And thank you for listening today. Please like, follow, and share this podcast with your friends. Until next time, I'm Wendy McConnell.
Thank you for listening to the BamCam podcast with Jack Burnette and Alison Castellano from Eater Financial Wellness, a financial advisory practice at RFG Advisory. To get in touch with us, visit today's show notes or go to our website at www.eaterfinancialwellness.com. That's ITER financialwellness.com. And please click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available.
Content here is for illustrative purposes and general information only. It is not legal, tax, or individualized financial advice, nor is it a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any specific security or engage in any specific trading strategy. Information here may be provided in part by third-party sources. These sources are generally deemed to be reliable. However, neither our guests nor RFG Advisory guarantee the accuracy of third-party sources. The views expressed here are those of our guest. They do not necessarily represent those of RFG Advisory, its employees, or its clients. This commentary should not be regarded as a description of advisory services provided by RFG Advisory or performance returns of any client. The views reflected in the commentary are subject to change at any time without notice. Securities offered by registered representatives of Private Client Services, member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services offered by investment advisory representatives of RFG Advisory, LLC, RFG Advisory or RFG, a registered investment advisor. Private Client Services and RFG Advisory are unaffiliated entities. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where RFG Advisory and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advisory services may be rendered by RFG Advisory unless a client agreement is in place. RFG Advisory is an SEC-registered investment advisor. SEC registration does not constitute an endorsement of RFG by the Commission, nor does it indicate that RFG or any associated investment advisory representative has attained a particular level of skill or ability.